Louise had been in the Criminal Investigations Department. Morton's death had left its mark on her, though less from the killing itself than from what happened when she informed his wife of the tragedy. A half hour after the ambulances had left with the two men, Louise rang the doorbell of the apartment where Morton and the young woman lived. When the door opened, Charlotte Vinter looked surprised. "Oh, hi," she said. "I thought you were Morton and Enrique. They forgot the keys." Louise couldn't recall the exact words she'd spoken, but Charlotte's expression etched itself in her memory. The way it shifted from joy to confusion and puzzlement. Why was a policewoman standing there in front of her? And finally, to total despair. Before Louise's words sank in, Charlotte nodded several times and said she was terribly sorry to hear what had happened, that it was horrible, but it couldn't be Morton. He'd just stepped out with her brother to pick something up at the 7-Eleven. She stubbornly maintained that Morton and Henrique couldn't have been assaulted, that there hadn't been enough time, and besides, no one gets attacked in broad daylight in Osterbro. No way that happens, she said, over and over, with desperation in her voice. Louise saw it in her dark eyes, though, when the truth began to settle in. Louise heard her partner coming up the steps behind her. She wanted to lead Charlotte farther inside, into the living room where they could sit down. But suddenly she froze, terrified at the sight of the young woman. She literally couldn't move. Then something in her chest loosened, giving way to a wave of anguish. Her throat tightened. She'd barely been able to breathe. Louise stood in the kitchen holding her tea glass, with echoes of the wretched taste in her mouth back then after throwing up on the neighbor's doormat. She felt again her humiliation, from the tears streaming down her cheeks and how she reeked of vomit. Her male colleague had been watching her. He closed the apartment door to block off all view of the hallway. Before she could speak, another wave of nausea rocked her. Yellow bile rose up in her throat, through her mouth. She wiped her lips on her sleeve. She was shaking all over. What was happening to her? She should be comforting that poor woman, but she couldn't even take care of herself. It felt as if she'd left her body and entered Charlotte Vinter. She wanted to open the door and slip inside beside the young woman and cry along with her. But her disgusted colleague led her up a few steps and shook her angrily. "What the fucking hell do you think you're doing?" He kept his voice low enough that Charlotte couldn't hear from the apartment. "If you're sick, go home. If you can't handle this, get back in the car, do your crying there. The last thing we need here is someone who can't be professional." She'd felt so small and insecure, and still paralyzed when she got to the car, trembling as if she were the one who'd been given the horrible news. Later, she'd thought some New Age type could explain how she'd suddenly taken on Charlotte Vinter's emotions, something like an out-of-body experience. Louise added sugar and milk to her tea, something she did only when she was tired or hungover. She walked into her bedroom, threw off her robe, and climbed into bed. Just to be safe, she set her alarm. 45 minutes. She grabbed the paper she'd laid on her night table when she came home. Her experience in Osterbro had cost her a week in bed and a session with Jakobsen, Department A's crisis counselor at the National Hospital. She'd also had to deal with the realization that she might not be as hardcore as she'd thought. Jakobsen explained that there was nothing mysterious about what had happened. It was an emotional breakdown, brought on by the intense feelings connected with this part of her job. He described how she had abandoned her role of messenger and identified emotionally with the receiver, which wasn't at all professional. No one in the department needed to say it. Police officers had to distance themselves when working on savage cases involving murder, violence, and child abuse. There was both good and bad.